My father received $45,000 in child support from me, but let me starve and wear broken shoes. When I called my mother, I discovered the truth. We sued him, and the judge was horrified. I'm 17 now. I'm studying and working part-time. And honestly, I need to tell this story because for a long time I thought it was normal to live like that. I mean, I thought all teenagers went through the same thing until I started telling people what was really happening at my dad's house, and I saw their horrified faces. I guess I should start at the beginning, when my parents got divorced and everything went to hell, basically. I was like 9 years old when my parents separated, and at that moment I didn't really understand much. I just knew that mom was going to live somewhere else, and I was staying with dad. I remember the day the judge decided that my dad would have custody. Mom was crying, but she didn't make a big scene. I think she thought it was for the best, or I don't know. She never really explained to me why she didn't fight harder for me. My dad back then seemed pretty normal. He worked in an office, doing something with computers, supposedly made good money. And the judge decided I'd be better off with him because he had a stable job and a bigger house. What nobody knew was how things were really going to be. The first few years after the divorce were weird, but not terrible, let's say. My dad worked all day and I basically raised myself. I'd get home from school and there was nobody home until like 7 or 8 at night. I'd make my own sandwiches for dinner, do my homework alone, that kind of stuff. It wasn't ideal, but it wasn't the end of the world either. You know what I mean? There was food in the fridge. I had a roof, clean clothes because I learned to use the washing machine myself when I was like 11. My dad was never very affectionate or anything, but at least things worked somehow. But then, when I was like 13 or 14 years old, things started getting worse and worse. I don't know if my dad started having money problems or what, but suddenly there was less and less food in the house. And when I say less food, I don't mean there wasn't variety. I mean, there was literally almost nothing. I'd open the fridge and there'd be like a bottle of ketchup, some milk that already smelled weird, and maybe leftovers from something my dad had bought for himself. The freezer had some pizzas, but my dad told me those were his and not to touch them. I started going hungry. Simple as that. I'd go to school without breakfast because there was nothing to have for breakfast. At lunch, I'd eat whatever they gave at the cafeteria, which thank God was free because we qualified for the subsidized lunch program, and then I'd get home and there was no dinner. Sometimes my dad would bring food for himself, like Chinese food or a burger, and he'd eat it in front of me without offering me anything. One time, I asked him if I could share, and he told me that if I wanted to eat, I should get myself a job. I was 14 years old. Things with clothes were also a disaster. I grew a ton between 13 and 15 years old. I mean, I went from being a short kid to being like 5'9", and all my clothes were ridiculously small on me. My pants came up above my ankles, my shirts were super tight, and my shoes, God, my shoes had holes in the soles and squeezed my feet horribly. I asked my dad several times to buy me new clothes, and he always told me he didn't have money, that things were tough, that when he got his next paycheck, he'd see what he could do. But that next paycheck never came, or it came and he spent it on his own stuff. So when I turned 15, I did exactly what my dad had told me. I got myself a job. There was a convenience store like 3 blocks from the house, and they were looking for someone for afternoon shifts, after school. I filled out the application, they did a super quick interview, and they hired me. I made minimum wage, like $8 an hour. I think that's what it was back then. And I worked like 20 hours a week. It wasn't a lot of money, but for me it was a fortune because it meant I could eat. With my first paycheck, I bought food. I went to the supermarket and bought things I could prepare easily. Instant ramen, bread, peanut butter, some cans of tuna, fruit. I spent like $40 and felt like I was a millionaire. I kept everything in my room because if I left it in the kitchen, my dad would eat it. I'm not exaggerating. He literally ate my stuff and then said he didn't know it was mine. I also bought myself a pair of new shoes at a discount store. Nothing fancy, but at least they didn't have holes and they fit well. I thought things were going to get better from there, that having my own money was going to solve my problems, but, oh, surprise, things got worse, much worse. Turns out that around the same time I got my job, my dad met Patricia. He didn't tell me he was dating anyone, didn't introduce me to anybody, nothing. One day, I came home from work and there was a woman in the house, cooking in our kitchen like it was nothing. My dad told me, "Oh, Alex, this is Patricia," and that was it. He didn't explain who she was, how long they'd been together, nothing. I was like, "Okay, I guess. Hi, Patricia," and I went to my room. Patricia was like 40-something years old. My dad was 45 at that time, I think. She worked in something related to sales, and from the beginning I realized she didn't like me. I don't know why. I never did anything to bother her, but you could tell in how she looked at me, in how she talked to me with that condescending tone. The first few weeks she came to the house often, but didn't live there. Until one day, without warning me, obviously, my dad told me that Patricia was going to move in with us. And oh, by the way, they had gotten married the previous weekend in a small ceremony. They didn't even invite me to the wedding. They didn't even tell me they were getting married. When Patricia officially moved in, like a month after I started working, things changed completely. Suddenly, the house had new rules. A bunch of rules that apparently only applied to me. I couldn't leave my shoes at the entrance. I couldn't use the living room after 8 at night. I couldn't make noise on weekends before noon. And then there were the chores. A million household chores that suddenly were my responsibility. Patricia made a list. Literally a handwritten list that she stuck on the fridge, with all the things I had to do. Wash the dishes after every meal, take out the trash every day, vacuum the whole house twice a week, clean the bathrooms, do the laundry, everyone's, not just mine, mow the lawn. And the worst part is that my dad didn't say anything. He just nodded when Patricia showed him the list and told me I'd better comply with everything because now we lived in her house. Technically, it was my dad's house, but okay, and we had to respect her rules. I tried to do it all. I really tried. I'd get home from school around 3 the afternoon, work from 4 to 9, get home dead tired, and had to start washing dishes or folding clothes before I could go to sleep. My grades started dropping because I didn't have time to do homework properly anymore. I was exhausted all the time. But every time I tried to talk to my dad about this, he told me to stop complaining, that everyone in the house had to contribute. And then, like 2 months after Patricia moved in, the bomb dropped. One night they were having dinner. Well, they were having dinner. I had already eaten my ramen in my room, and Patricia called me to the kitchen. She told me they needed to talk to me about something important. My dad was there, sitting without saying anything, just letting her talk. Patricia told me that since I was almost an adult now and had a job, it was fair that I contribute financially to the house. I asked her what she meant, and she told me, clear as day, that from now on, I had to give them half of each of my paychecks as rent. I stood there, unable to believe what I was hearing. Half my salary? I made like $160 every 2 weeks. That meant they wanted to take $80 from me. I told Patricia I needed that money to buy my food and my stuff, and she told me that was my problem, that if I wanted to live under her roof, I had to pay rent like any adult. I looked at my dad expecting him to say something, to defend me, but he just shrugged and said Patricia was right, that it was time I learned financial responsibility. I had no choice. What was I going to do? Leave? I was 15 years old. I couldn't go anywhere. So I started giving them half my paycheck every 2 weeks. And yes, I kept doing all the household chores too. I was paying rent and working as a maid at the same time. Patricia didn't even give me receipts or anything. She just took the money and that was it. I never knew what they spent it on, but it definitely wasn't on food for me because the fridge was still empty except for their stuff. I started saving my tips in cash. I hid them in a shoebox under my bed. It wasn't much, maybe $5 or $10 a week, but I was saving it to buy myself new shoes, because the ones I had were destroyed again. It took me like 4 months to save up $80. I was so proud of having done it, you know? It was my money. I had earned it, and nobody knew I had it. Until one day I got home from school and the box was empty. I looked everywhere, thinking maybe I had moved it and didn't remember. But no. Someone had taken the money. I confronted Patricia and she didn't even deny it. She told me she had found the money cleaning my room, that he cleaned my own room. She never went in there, and that since I owed them money for food I had supposedly eaten. What food? Air. She had taken what belonged to her. I yelled at her that that was my money, that it had taken me months to save it, and she just told me not to yell at her or she'd call my dad. My dad, of course, took her side. told me not to be dramatic, and that Patricia had the right to take the money if I owed her. That's when something broke inside me. I realized that no matter how hard I worked or how much I tried, they were always going to find a way to take everything from me. I didn't have close friends because I never had time to go out or do normal teenage things, and I hadn't talked to my mom in years. But that night, lying in my bed, unable to sleep, I thought about my mom. We didn't have a relationship. I could barely remember her well, but she was the only person I could think of who might be able to help me. I looked up her number on my old phone. I had never deleted it, even though I had never used it either, and I sent her a text message. I just told her, "Hi, Mom. I know we haven't talked in a long time, but I need help. Could we talk?" She responded like 5 minutes later. She told me yes, of course, that we could talk whenever I wanted. I called her that same night from the bathroom with the water running so Patricia and my dad wouldn't hear me. When Mom answered, I started crying, like really crying, and I told her everything. I told her about the lack of food, about having to work, about Patricia stealing my money, about everything. She was crying too on the other end, telling me she had no idea things were so bad, that my dad had never told her anything. And then she told me something that left me cold. She told me that my dad had been receiving child support from her all these years, like $600 a month that was supposed to be for my food, my clothes, my stuff. $600 every month for 6 years. Do the math. It's a lot of money. And I had never seen a cent of it. My dad had been spending it on who knows what, while I went hungry and wore broken shoes. Mom was furious. More furious than I even was. She told me she was going to do something about it. Not to worry. That she was going to take care of it. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. Maybe I thought she was just going to talk to my dad or something. But Mom went further. She hired a lawyer. Like 2 weeks after that call, my dad received some legal papers. Mom was suing him for custody and for misuse of child support. My dad was fuming. He was yelling all over the house about how Mom had no right, about how I was an ungrateful brat who had gone crying to her. Patricia was also furious. She blamed me for everything. Said, I had ruined their perfect family life. What perfect family life? In what universe? Mom's lawyer contacted me directly and explained that there was going to be a court hearing, that they would probably ask me to testify about what it had been like living with my dad. He told me to gather any evidence I had, receipts, text messages, whatever. I started documenting everything. I took pictures of the empty fridge. I kept receipts of what I bought with my money. I even wrote like a resignation letter from my job where I explained that I had to work to be able to eat because my dad didn't give me food. I didn't end up quitting, but I wrote the letter just in case. The hearing was like 3 months later. It was horrible, intense, and at the same time kind of liberating. I had to sit in front of a judge and tell everything, with my dad and Patricia sitting there looking at me with hatred. I told them about the food, about the broken shoes, about working and paying rent at 15 years old, about Patricia stealing my tips. My dad's lawyer tried to make me look like a rebellious, lying teenager. But I had evidence. I had photos. I had my purchase receipts. I had the text messages with Mom. And then, Mom testified. She brought all the receipts of the child support transfers, proving that she had sent almost $45,000 over the last 6 years. The lawyer asked my dad what he had spent that money on. If I didn't have food or adequate clothing, my dad had no answer. He just stammered about house expenses and stuff like that, but he couldn't justify why his 5-year-old son had to work to survive while he was receiving $600 a month specifically for my maintenance. The judge was not happy, not at all. He asked my dad directly why he had allowed me to go without necessities when he had the resources to take care of me. He asked him about the rent they charged me, about the excessive household chores, about the situation with Patricia. My dad tried to defend himself, but every answer he gave made him look worse. At the end of the hearing, which lasted like all day because there was a ton of testimony and evidence, the judge issued his decision. He gave full custody to my mom, effective immediately. In addition, he ordered my dad to pay back to Mom all the child support he had misused, the full amount that hadn't been spent on me. He also said my dad had to continue paying child support until I turned 18. but now the amount was going to be higher, and it was going to be monitored more closely how it was spent. When the judge announced his decision, I felt like a huge weight was lifted off me, like I literally felt I could breathe again. My dad stood up and started yelling at the judge, saying this was an injustice, that I had betrayed him, that I was going to regret it. The judge told him to sit down or he was going to charge him with contempt. Patricia was crying. I don't know if from rage or what, but honestly, I didn't care. I left the court with Mom that day, and we went straight to her apartment. It was small, like a 2-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy. But it was clean and warm, and when I opened the fridge, there was real food. Mom made me dinner that night, nothing elaborate, just pasta with sauce and salad, but it was the first home-cooked meal anyone had made me in years, and I cried while eating. The weeks after were weird, like trying to adapt to a completely different life. Mom let me quit the convenience store job so I could focus on my studies. She bought me new clothes, shoes that fit properly, school supplies. We started therapy together to rebuild our relationship and to help me process everything that had happened. It wasn't instantly perfect. We had our difficult moments, and sometimes I felt weird being there. But little by little, things got better. My dad tried to contact me a couple of times at first. He'd send messages saying he wanted to explain his side of the story, that I didn't understand how hard it had been for him. I blocked his number after the 3rd time. I have no interest in hearing his excuses. Patricia also sent me a super long message blaming me for ruining her marriage and her financial stability, saying I was a horrible son, and I don't know what else. I blocked her too. Now, 2 years later, things are good. Not perfect, because I'm still working through a lot of stuff in therapy, but good. I finished high school last year with decent grades. I'm working part-time at a library, a much calmer environment than the convenience store, and I'm going to start classes at community college next semester. Mom and I have a solid relationship. Now, we talk about everything. We have dinner together almost every night when our schedules match. Sometimes I think about everything that happened, and it still makes me angry. Especially when I think about all that money my dad stole. Money that was supposed to be for me. I think about how things could have been different if he had simply been a decent father, if he had used that money for what it was for. But I also try not to get stuck in the past because I can't change what happened. I can only move forward. Last week I turned 17 and Mom threw me a small party, just the 2 of us and a cake we bought at the bakery. She asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and I told her I already had everything I needed. And it's true. I have a safe place to live, enough food, and someone who really cares about me. After everything I went through, that's more than enough.